Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Chris Groshong, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And we want to talk about these amazing things you're doing with CoinStructive. You've built a great company that provides an amazing service, and I want to make sure that we have an opportunity to talk about some of the amazing things you're doing with it, okay?
Yeah, great. Thank you for having me, Mike.
Thanks
It's
for
a
being here.
pleasure to be here.
I'm super excited for our time together. So where were you born?
I was born in the Bay Area,
Okay.
California, East Bay, and grew up there for the first 20 plus years of my life. And I'm pretty thankful for being in that location of the world during that time period. So I'm almost 47, and my high school years were in the mid 90s. So I watched the internet like blossom around me, and all because being basically in Silicon Valley, right? So that was kind of a great place to grow up.
That's awesome. What city were you in?
I grew up in Castro Valley, Hayward. So basically I went to Hayward schools.
Yeah.
And I'm a Hayward high school graduate. Go Farmers.
That's awesome, dude. So growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up there?
The diversity of being in the Bay Area. I was a minority also at my high school, right? Which helps keep things, I think, in perspective too. So having a deep understanding of what's important to people in general, I think has really helped me build a career that where I'm able to assist folks, because we provide services, right? So
yeah, and it's an amazing service, yeah.
Plus lots of good Mexican food, and I really liked being. So Hayward is right across from the San Mateo Bridge,
right?
And you're essentially right in the middle of everything in the Bay Area. You're 20 minutes to Oakland, you're 30 or 40 minutes to San Jose, you're 40 minutes to San Francisco, also 40 minutes or 30, 40 minutes to the San Francisco airport, which is in South San Francisco. So you're very centralized in a way, and you have very great easy access. Plus BART runs through Hayward, and BART, also Amtrak has a Hayward stop. So when I went to college, and I'm probably getting ahead of you, but I used to take the train.
Yeah, that's cool. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Who was the most influential person to me growing up? That's a very good question. I mean, your parents are always probably the most influential people on your life.
Yeah.
And I'm lucky to have had both parents. So, and that was always, I mean, obviously that's a blessing. Not everybody is that fortunate. Blue collar father, stay-at-home mother until I was about 12, and then she went back to college to finish a master's degree and work in psychology.
Oh, that's cool.
So I kind of got to see both sides of things, and so it was nice to have a well-rounded. So I would say my parents are probably the biggest influence on me, but then I would say the second biggest influence when you're growing up are your school teachers.
Yeah.
So I remember like my fourth grade teacher immensely, because it was the first male teacher I ever had. And growing up in the East Bay, everybody was Oakland A's fans, but I was a San Francisco Giants fan. And that's partly because when my dad was growing up, the A's were still in Philadelphia before they
Yeah.
moved, and
Yeah.
there was only the Giants. And
Yeah.
so
They were
that's what he,
transplants, right?
they're both transplants,
Yeah.
right?
Nice.
So, but that was the team he started watching when he was young, and so that was what was always on in the background. And so being a San Francisco Giants fan living in the East Bay, you get a lot of crap for that.
A lot of guff. A lot of guff. So when you went to high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Um, so I've always been a like kind of a Renaissance guy. Like I like all things, and I think it's important to be well-rounded. But yes, science to me was the thing that I loved the most, and clicked. It was the biggest. I just enjoyed all the sciences. So
You were smack in the middle of where science happens, right? So
that's the other great thing about the Bay Area, right?
yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. There's a lot of research up there. So when you were in high school, did you play any sports?
I played sports growing up too. So I played soccer, baseball, and a little bit of football. I used to work out with the and train with the wrestling team,
Yeah.
because those guys were pretty extreme.
Yeah, they were.
Um, but as far as sports go, baseball is my number one love. So I play that outside of high school. And then when we got older, I played adult fast pitch softball for a while, which was cool because I got to play on a team with my dad right after, age
Ooh,
18
that's awesome, dude.
for a couple of years, which was fun before I
Not many people get that. That's a real
went away to
privilege.
college. Yeah.
That's awesome.
So
So
I also so other curricular activities,
yeah,
high school wise,
yeah,
I played the trumpet from the age of 10 through senior year in high school.
that's
And
awesome.
so in order to play in high school, you had to be a part of the marching band.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to play in the jazz band. You couldn't just play in the jazz band. So having to get up extra early to go do marching band stuff just so I could play the stuff that I enjoyed. Right. So a lot of extracurricular activities. I kept myself busy. I was also part of student government, student body. I was the ASB treasurer of the school. So I guess finance has kind of been in my people trust me with money,
That's
apparently.
it. That's it. That's awesome, man. So at some point in high school, you decide to go to college. Where do you go to college and why?
So this gets really into the depths. It's a great question because not many people have an answer like this. So when I was 15, I was a sophomore in high school, and it was biology was that for that year. We had 2 weeks on genetics, right? And it's like Gregor Mendel grew a bunch of peas, and he was a monk, and you're like, what? Right? But then they start bringing out all this stuff, and they're like, it's like big puzzles, and it's like if you cross this with that, then it turns into this, and I was like, and all the light bulbs went off. And now you got to remember, so this is around 94.
Yeah.
1994. And at that time, the Human Genome Project was just getting kicked off, right? And so I had friends who were several years older than me, had already graduated high school, and were working for companies like AOL
Oh,
and and smaller tech companies and things like that. And I was watching them change jobs rapidly, right? And everybody realized, yeah, and even to this day, tech is not a secure place. There's always like you make good money, but then you get laid off, and then it's like you got to find another job 18 months, and it's like that is a rat race. It's like you got to climb the ladder. You're always looking over your shoulder. And I was like, do I really want to go? Because I felt at this time I was like, I have two paths. Right. I love genetics. This is awesome. And the Human Genome Project is going to provide this avenue for all this innovation and growth and to help people. Because what I really want to do is help people. That is my underlying ultimate motivation. So how can I help people? Can I work on the internet? Sure. Is that going to really help people? No, it'll provide things for people, but I don't know if it really help people. And maybe in like third world countries, there's always a way to make an excuse or a way to justify things. But when I thought about the Human Genome Project and where I would be after 2.5 more years of high school,
Right.
and then at least 4 years of college, right? So I'm looking, okay, 7 years out, this is a 10-year project, like it's already started, so like it'll be right on the kind where it's like all this innovation is going to happen. And so at age 15, I said, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go down the path of genetics. And so when I started looking at colleges in the United States, there were 3 colleges in the entire country that offered a bachelor's degree with any kind of genetics. Everything else was molecular biology. And I really wanted to specialize because I wasn't sure if I really wanted to get a PhD or a master's. I kind of wanted to specialize in the science and then get into the field and figure out how things worked.
Right.
So that's what I did. And out of the 3 schools, it was the Ohio State. It was Boulder, Colorado, University of Colorado Boulder, and UC Davis, and just
Wow, right up the road.
so my parents made an agreement with me that if I went to the junior college in Hayward for a couple of years, that then basically I wouldn't have any student debt because I wouldn't be at a 4-year for 4 or more years. And so that was a good trade-off. And I was like, well, no student debt. That sounds like a dream come true. So I had to suck it up and live at home for a couple extra years while all my friends were moving out and doing fun things, right? But it all paid off in the end, and I ended up at UC Davis and living with a couple of friends I went to high school with. So it was a really great experience.
So you graduate from UC Davis. Where do you go from there?
Back to the Bay Area.
Okay.
So I moved home for a couple of years,
Yeah.
trying to get established and figure out how to get going. And then the economy, like 2001, right? So this is like right around 9/11, right? And and speaking of 9/11, right? They're almost there. So this like totally changed the whole dynamic of the country, and businesses were like not hiring, and we were in a very not a great position. So
I just kind of sat still for a couple of months.
yeah, it was really hard to find a job in science, especially entry level. Um, Anytime any entry level position is hard to find, seems like if you're like, oh, we want experience, and you're like, well, where do you get experience, right? Everybody's problem from the beginning of time. So that's one of the things actually I've built into CoinStructive is like sometimes motivation is more important than knowledge, because knowledge can be taught, right? People can learn. So for me, it was like, okay, here's these opportunities. Let's go get them, right?
So where do you go?
So I worked at a company in the East Bay, or on the peninsula, called Applied Biosystems.
Okay.
For a year and a half, and then I ended up taking a job at a company called Chiron in Emeryville, which is now, I think, Novartis.
Yeah.
But at around that time, one of my best friends, I mean, he's more like a brother than a friend. He went to the Navy, out of high school, and he got stationed in Japan, and he was going to get stationed in San Diego.
Oh wow.
After his tour in Japan.
Yeah.
And this is also, so now we're talking 2005,
right,
or ish, and this is when just before the housing market imploded. So, and in the Bay Area and pretty much across the country, people were getting loans for zero, like almost nothing down.
Right.
And people were using what they call stated income. You just told somebody how much you made, and they were like, sounds good.
Yeah.
Here's your loan. And people couldn't pay their loans. And that's why the whole market turned upside down. Well, I mean, that's the short story,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's
pretty
small,
much it in a nutshell.
that's a small piece of it. But
yeah.
but like that is what helped us get started in San Diego. So I was like, well, I need to go someplace in the country that also has biotech.
Yeah.
And there was only a few places in the country. There's like North Carolina, right? Had big medical research area, and then Minnesota had one, and then there was some stuff in like Texas.
Right.
But at age, in your early 20s, I had this feeling like if I left California, it would be really hard to come back because California is expensive.
Yeah.
So that was the goal. Like if he's gonna get stationed in San Diego, well, let's look in San Diego. So we ended up buying a condo together, and we lived together for like 10 years or so, maybe 8 years together in San Diego, and both helped each other get started. And so that was a really great experience.
Good for you. So you come to San Diego. Where do you go to work in San Diego?
Another biotech company.
Okay.
I went from, because the company I worked for
Right.
was pretty large. Then they got acquired by a larger company, and I really wanted that small company feel. So I went to a small biotech company, and there was like 150 people or so. That was awesome. There was it was like a family feel. There was happy hour, but people potluck happy hours, and where they would do events, and it was fun.
Yeah.
And I still have friends from that job, and I worked with those folks for about 10 years. And that company got bought out by Eli Lilly,
Oh yeah. Okay.
and I made it through a bunch of layoffs. And the core of that group kind of stayed together and moved facilities. And but then, it was around 2017. Well, it was actually earlier than that, but I found crypto in 2012, 2013, but I didn't really make the decision that this was going to be the next thing for me until later.
So at some point you make the decision that it's something you want to pursue. Talk about that decision-making process. So you discovered it, right? And then at some point you decided that you wanted to specialize in it, like you wanted this to be what you did. Talk about that process.
So in order to talk about that process, I need to back up and kind of fill in a little bit of the
That's fine.
gaps
Yeah, let's do it.
along that path of working in the biotech industry. So had this idea and this goal of, at an early age where I wanted to be and what industry I wanted to be working in and what kind of a field, right? I mean, not a lot of people at age like 15 and a half, like say, this is what I'm going to do for the next 10, 15 years at that age, right? But for me, it all just clicked and made sense. So I've always had this longer 10, 15-year kind of approach to things, as well as, where I want to be in a year or two, but also where do I want to be in 15, right? And how long, a lot of people aren't realistic with what their time frames are of how to get to where they want to be.
That's true.
Change does not happen overnight.
Right.
So part of the decision to go into crypto was that I got sober in 2010. So somewhere along the way, I lost my way, and I was a fully functioning alcoholic. Um, and I wasn't a really happy person because part of it was I drank because I wasn't really happy with my job.
Right.
I got to where I thought I wanted to be, but then I didn't really have a plan after that. And I got sucked into the rat race of everyday life, commuting an hour, 13 miles, and commuting an hour plus each way. And just not really like being fulfilled with the actual work. I mean, I always saw the greater good of it, and I felt connected to it, but not enough that like I felt fulfilled as a person. And so instead of doing something about it, I drank for a long time. And that obviously that doesn't solve any problems. If anything, it just exacerbates and adds to it. So between health stuff and just not being in a good mental place, after a certain amount of time, I just committed to myself that a change needed to happen. So when you quit drinking, you have all this free time because I basically spent 8 hours a day, at least probably every day, drinking. I was up to about at least a half a bottle of vodka a day. and I was bloated and, and chunky and unhappy. And so, when I decided I needed to make a change and fill all this extra time in a day, I got entrepreneurial. And I started a video production company. It was called Illinois Street Studios. And unfortunately, during this time period, 2010 through 2013, even a little before that, the technology of cameras, like were megapixels on cameras, were like doubling every year. And the quality was just outpacing the cost of being able to stay up to date with it.
Yeah.
And not to mention that Southern California is extremely competitive when it comes to video production in general. So I also started scuba diving as a hobby, right?
Yeah.
So that was another thing that helped me, one, reconnect with nature, find a sense of like something to do with a group, right? Because you don't dive alone.
Right.
So it was that those two things helped me with a healing process to get to the position where when crypto was introduced to me, right, I had already like started to shut down the video production business
Right.
because it had been 2.5 years and I wasn't making any money, and I was like, all right, I need to think about doing something else. And so then all of a sudden it was like I was still like in the video production, like I was like, I don't want to give this up. I want to keep going. So I worked at it for another like 6 to 9 months. It wasn't going anywhere. So then I revisited crypto in 2013. Because when I found out about it in 2012, first of all, there was no crypto. There was Bitcoin, and that was it.
That's it. Yeah.
And honestly, when you're first kind of told about Bitcoin, it sounds like a Ponzi scheme.
Right.
It totally does.
Yeah.
And then in somewhere mid 2013, I read an article that was actually written by Vitalik Buterin, who is the creator of Ethereum, about Bitcoin. And first of all, I read an article that led me to that article.
Okay.
And I said, and it was the light bulb moment that went off, and I was like, holy smokes, you can't turn it off.
Yeah.
Look what happened with the internet. You can't turn it off, even if a country makes it illegal. Right? Or restricts what you can view.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean it doesn't exist outside of it.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that there's not going to be innovation that, flows around it. So when I was like, you can't turn it off, it was like, holy smokes, this is the second coming of the internet, but for money. And one of the reasons that pushed me to say yes to this was part of working in pharma. So I don't know, I think it was around 2015 or 2016, Eli Lilly asked us to donate to their PAC so they could go to Washington and lobby. They at the time they were a $9 billion a year revenue company. But because of how lobbying works, they're considered an individual and can only contribute so much, and they need all these other people, the employees, which they have 30 or 40,000 of at the time, to contribute money back to the company. And they made it like this, hey, we're going to put your name up and you're going to get on this list. And I was like, this is wrong. Money is broken. If they need our money to go to Washington to lobby, something's wrong.
Yeah, something.
And I go, so I could probably help just as many, if not more people, by helping to fix money or giving people an option to opt out of the system that they're in for one that they feel that can give them either some anonymity or pseudo-anonymity, as we know, but also an option to get out of their state-controlled money.
Right.
So all the light bulbs went off, and I was like, this is the future. And I'm so early. If I were to go back to school, what would I have to do? Well, I'd have to work. I'd still have to work my job, and then I'd have to go to school nights and weekends. And that'd probably take me at least 4 years to complete like a 2-year degree. So realistically put yourself in a position like, where do you want to be in 2 to 4 years? Right? And so all my vacation, all my free time, I started first just on the internet and talking to people.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.